Okay, here we go. Okay, it's Monday, May 2nd and 2022, and this is the meeting of the Sconset Advisory Board. Welcome, everybody. I've got an old agenda here, which is not going to work, but oh, there's Caroline. Okay, so members, when I call your name, please respond. Please respond. Clement Durkees.
Here.
You, Angus McLeod.
Here.
Caroline Ellis. I see a smile. That means she's here waving. Okay, good. Rob Benchley is here, and I see we have a few other people, which is great. I guess I'll take a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. The chair says that we have a quorum. We're going to run right down to other business and presenting Michael May, a former Sconset Advisory Board member, among many other things. Michael, will you have things to show on the screen or anything, or?
I don't right now. I mean, I always come back at a later date, but I just wanted to kind of basically give you an idea of what I'm doing and also ask for some of your help about it, and run through it. And I can take as little time or as long a time as you want.
Okay.
For people.
We can turn it right over to you and give us an introduction, or just tell us what you're thinking.
Okay, great. Well, as many of you know, I was asked by Betsy Grubbs at Sconset Trust to help them with a project, and we've decided to call it Building with Nantucket in Mind.
No.
I mean, I've Sconset in mind.
Whoops.
Whoops. That was a test. I see if you were, falling asleep already. But so we realize that Sconset really is different than very different in town, and that it actually has several neighborhoods that are different from each other, and that it would be really good to have a set of recommendations or bullets, whatever you want to call it, that kind of steer people in the right direction when they're looking to build a house or add an addition or make a change to a building in the old historic the core area of Sconset. So this project is meant not only for property owners, but hopefully for the design community and also the SAB and the HTC. So it can really hopefully help people when they're thinking about making changes. We identified 6 neighborhoods in Sconset. Of course, the historic core, which would be the area Front Street, Broadway, Center, Shell, between basically the market up to Wade Cottages. The second area would be Codfish Park, which I think is probably self-explanatory. Sunset Heights, which is the area below Main Street, between Maury and the ocean. So that would include the Underhill Cottages, as well as other late 19th century and early 20th century buildings in that neighborhood. Main Street itself, which is really the entrance community, and has its own special character. New Street and vicinity, which would be New Street and the area north up to Coffin Street, would include, Lincoln and West Sankaty, that general area, and Baxter Road. So those were the 6 major neighborhoods that we looked at, and that really are distinctively different. So for each neighborhood, I have they're basically several sections. We talk a little bit about the history of the neighborhood, when it was developed, that sort of thing. And also defining features or elements. So we talk about the main styles that you find in those neighborhoods. Of course, like in the historic core, it would be the fish cottage, the fish house. Where in Sunset Heights, it would be various Victorian type architecture, but also the Underhill cottages. So we do that. And then the next two sections, I think, are probably the most critical in terms of the SAB, and they would be threats to those neighborhood or perceived threats, maybe even future threats to those neighborhoods. And then a list of recommendations, what people can do when they're considering a new building or changes to a historic building. And what I'd like to do is just, one thing we realized is that we also had to have some general recommendations, that a lot of just general basic preservation theory applies to each neighborhood. So for example, construction of a new building in Sconset should be sensitively designed to reflect the character of the surrounding area through careful consideration of its location on the site, as well as its scale and massing. I mean, that's basic, design guideline bullet. New construction should always be in harmony with the old, and at the same time be distinguishable from the old, so that the evolution of the district can be clearly determined. And I think in the past, these are basically the Secretary of Interior design guidelines, maybe reworded. In the past, that has been sometimes misinterpreted, where the National Park Service would always want to see an old building and then maybe a new wing that is almost modern. And that's not what we mean here. We mean that maybe there'd be a change to the window type, or if you were dealing with something in town, it would be obviously a timber frame building would be different than an addition. It wouldn't be the same type of framing section, so it'd be easily distinguishable. The scale of a new structure, its footprint, its height, size of windows and doors, decorative trim, and other architectural elements, of course, should also be in keeping with its neighbors. So those are the basic, the ones. There's also the idea of the height of new construction, which I think is really important in Sconset. And this might be a little controversial, but I think the height of a new structure should fall within the range seen for the streetscape to preserve the neighborhood character. It should be based on historic structures rather than on new or non-contributing buildings. So I think that's a basic tenet that should be upheld throughout Sconset. So they were the general ideas, but then each neighborhood I go into more detailed. And one of the big things I wanted to ask you all, and maybe it has changed since I've been there. I can't believe it's been 2 years, but or over 2 years. But I think to assist with the design review, it's really important to have a streetscape, especially for a new building, especially when a building is going to be taller or maybe taller than other buildings. And that's, I think we had to face it, most new buildings when they're proposed are going to be bigger than the historic buildings. So I think that a streetscape elevation is easily, really enables you to see right away if it fits in, or hopefully fits into the neighborhood. So that was one of the big things that I would recommend. I don't know if any of you remember, but one thing I thought was really helpful when, I forget whose design it was, but on Shell Street, somebody had proposed that new building that's associated with rooftop. It was the rooftop garden.
The Woolschlagers. Yeah.
Yes,
It's across the
yes,
street. It
yes.
was their garden. Yeah.
Yeah, it was their garden. But when that was brought in, I remember that there was a streetscape, or at least it showed how it related to the buildings on either side. And that was really helpful. And that's something that I know when I was in your shoes, that was rare. Sometimes you see things in isolation. And that's when I think there can be problems. Because sometimes a design on paper looks absolutely beautiful. It's building with Nantucket in mind, maybe not Wisconsin in mind, but so I think that's a critical thing that recommend, and you're gonna hear that over and over again in each of the neighborhoods. So when you see this, so far, does anybody have any questions or comments? Or I don't want to.
No, well, my comment would be that as we all know, what we're looking at a lot lately has been Codfish Park, and
Right.
the streetscapes would be invaluable. Now, I don't know how Rob would know if we try to ask for that in the package. It would, because it certainly would be helpful. I mean, a lot of us live around here and can be down there and check it out ourselves, but visually that would be great.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's hard. I mean, you can check it out, but sometimes you're reviewing something and there are 10 applications. You're trying to remember what the building next door looks like, and you should all know that, because we lived in Scotland.
No, but you're right, because so we can go down there and we say, okay, this is the house that wants to add the second story, but how high would that be? How does that relate to the people? You need to see it on paper laid out. So yeah,
right.
That's a great recommendation.
I think you're right, Michael, that almost every application is presented in isolation. Almost never is there a streetscape that shows the houses in relation to other ones. Sometimes there are notes about, the height of this address or that address in relation to this one. But the streetscape is so important in the review process. And the more visuals we have, the better educated we are on our recommendations to the HTC.
Right. And I would think that would be a fairly easy thing. I mean, Angus, you would know for most people presenting those plans to do.
It doesn't require a lot of trespassing, but
yeah.
I mean, to get accurate measurements of things, you either have to do a lot of research, at the building department, or just like pull, stick a tape up. But it also really helps to have streetscape photos, which is helpful if you're not actually doing a measured elevation, flat on of things.
Right. I think that's good too.
Yeah, I think that the over the last few years anyway, especially with the whole Zoom thing happening, the HDC has been really asking people to present at least photographs of the neighborhood. So there's definitely more of a trend towards that. So I would say this fits right in.
Good. Well, I mean, that was I think that's the key one for almost every neighborhood. I think you could, the HCZ could take that to the oldest district too. But there are a couple of other general things that I thought were important to hit on. And one is the relocation of historic buildings. I mean, we hear over and over again that Nantucket has history of moving buildings, and it really did. But sometimes I noticed that in the past that sometimes that can be kind of misused, where you're moving a building not to save it, to protect it, but you're moving a building to squeeze another building on the lot, or to subdivide, or to the key things to subdivide, or to get an extra building. But and sometimes you hear that people want to do this because it will then conform to zoning. And I kind of feel like those are never any they're not really good reasons unless it is to preserve the building. And so I do have a little, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that, your thoughts about that. Did I get that right? Are you still seeing that in Sconset at times?
Definitely. I mean, we're moving building is not the, I found a lot and I really want this building, so I'm going to move this building to that lot. And no, it's about getting rid of the building.
Oh,
In order to do, whatever the program is.
right. So it's almost like they just want to get the building moved.
I mean, the past couple of meetings of HSAB, there's a house actually on Main Street that is, they want to move 2 feet and it's already subdivided so that they can build in the back lot. But, it would be taking it off its original foundation and obviously having to demolish it and rebuild it. So, at every meeting, we discourage that from happening. And, if there's a pre-existing non-conforming situation, that's exactly what it is. It's pre-existing. So it's not helping as far as zoning goes.
Right.
I actually did have a project on New Street that we needed a foundation. And it was, within the 5-foot setback, and we had plenty of room to move it out of that. But, we maintained the same footprint and we built a crawl space foundation. But it was, back off the lot line 5 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just all meant to be general guidelines, as you know, but I thought that was a problem that I saw in the past. So I thought I'd bring it up. And so it sounds like
it's very much ongoing. It's ongoing.
Yeah. The other thing was the idea of demolition, which we don't. I mean, in the past, we didn't talk about it that much. Very few properties were demolished. They were either moved or they were completely rebuilt. And then, they'd take walls down one by one. So the thing was always standing, but it was a total demolition. I think that's a interesting thing. We're reconstructing buildings sometimes rather than preserving them, and the whole idea of maintenance, preservation, and rather than replace. I will discuss a little bit too, but I didn't know if there's something that, and this might be something you might want to just think about for a while, unless you have something off the top of your head. But I always think about the HDC requiring a window survey, for historic buildings sometimes, which I think was a great thing, but is there some kind of thing that can be
a building survey?
A building survey, historic building, what's original, what's the condition of that? It seems like that might be a way in order to get around this whole rebuilding, reconstruction thing. So I see that as a real problem for historic buildings at times. But I didn't know what you thought about that. But I was gonna, I'm still working on that section. So any thoughts that anybody has about that?
Well, I mean, this has been a frustrating year for anyone in Sconset who's been looking, at the building that's going on there. A couple of fairly high-profile buildings that have been completely rebuilt, new and on Grand. Ocean View House has been rebuilt. We came in for dormers and miscellaneous window changes, and the floor systems, the walls, the everything, all the windows. It will be a new building. So we've lost a really significant piece of history. really without, any permit saying, this is a rebuild or this is a demolition. And I thought that was very interesting. The studies that happen every year. What is it this year they were talking studying salvage and
Oh, right.
is it RTI? I've forgotten anyway, that the students that come every year and they do the studies. And so one of the things was about, just process and building use and that there could be a system of checks and balances where when you have a project of any sort of significance, that there is a sort of before and after check, just as there is with the certificate of occupancy, that there is a sort of a check of, oh, the old building still is here and this is all that was lost or changed. And then there would be associated, whatever penalties or fees or whatever would be attributed to any a loss that was not applied for.
Right. So when they did the Ocean View house, did they actually do a demolition drawing?
No.
No.
Just, I think the excuse is, and this is what I've heard, is that when you get in there, you find that the boards are rotting and they've got wood, termites or whatever those things are called. And so they had to replace it.
Right.
And I know that we have seen in dumpsters, beautiful pieces of wood that have been pulled out and thrown away. But there was nobody else there to say, you could reuse this, you could finish this.
Right. Right.
So that, we see sections come down of the walls. You see the beautiful old boards. I'm not up there on the third floor looking with the guys, but they say it's rotten. They say it can't be reused and they pull it down and then you see a new section. And that's happening a lot.
Yeah, to me, it seems like an excuse or the easier way to do it. So.
But they do it kind of on the spot, Michael.
Right.
So it's not that anybody went in there before and checked it all and said, oh no, these boards are fine. You can reuse those, so. And of course, everybody's shorthanded. So I don't know how to get anybody to do these kind of assessments.
So, yeah, it's almost sounds like there has to be something like a historic structures report, but then there also needs to be follow up and somebody checking, like that's somebody's job, like the building inspector or somebody who would be qualified to do that. So that's helpful to me because at least then even if we don't have an answer for it, but just to say these are the problems and these are, possible solutions, or possible recommendations down the road.
And maybe that is something that could be added to the checklist.
Right.
There's a rough plumbing and a rough electric and then the structural inspection before everything starts, the walls get covered over. And if someone goes in at that point and they see all new lumber in a 19th century house, there should be a box to check or not check.
Right.
About that.
Right. The last one, the last general issue I had, and it's not really an issue, it's just something, it's something that I think, it's zoning, how do you deal with zoning and when there are conflicts? Because when you look at the zoning in Sconset, the height of the buildings are all, it's 30 feet, but that's not appropriate in, Codfish Park we were talking about, for example, or we're, along Pochik, that wouldn't be acceptable. But there might be other things too. I know that, pools, hot tubs, fire pits have all been issues and, and I don't know what you guys are talking about after me. I noticed there was something on zoning and I thought, well, maybe I should stick around and hear it. But, you know, those are issues sometimes, those little things that I didn't know if, you know, and setbacks sometimes, or frontage things, or with zoning, or sometimes in conflict with the historic buildings, what are there. But I didn't know if there was anything like that you see as really red flags.
Well, I think that, oh, I see Caroline. Do you have your hand up, Caroline?
Just appeared. No, but I do have a comment after you do.
Okay. Yeah, we see that all the time, where the division between strictly design and something that gets into zoning or Board of Health or something, you know, they can't all exist independently. They're all related. And so frequently we can think or speak about things that get into those areas, but that's not, like, we keep being told that's not our
Right.
purview.
Right.
But we certainly talk about it because, I mean, my feeling is that it's okay to talk about it because it's part of the whole thing.
Right.
And there are public hearings and people can view their, you know, if it's a zoning thing they want to speak about, well, okay, but.
Right. Well, aren't there some things that are, there are some things, like if you're building in a neighborhood and all the buildings are a story high and you want a 2-story, but by zoning you're allowed, that would be something that you would comment.
Oh, yeah.
On, you know
We
what I
do.
mean? Yeah.
We do have,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely something where.
Right. So there are some things that there are some zoning things that the historic district regulations basically, you know, override.
Right.
Yeah.
one thing, this is Caroline. I
Hi,
just,
Caroline.
hi there. We keep running into is the encroachment on the right of ways in the historic district, with people just going ahead and doing whatever they want.
Oh, right.
With no penalty. We don't think we're supposed to survey the setbacks and
Mhm,
but people keep encroaching.
mhm.
And I think that should be clearly defined. I
Right.
think the rule should be very clear to everyone.
And do you see that in like all the neighborhoods, Caroline, or do you mean like in the historic core, that historic where the little paths are, or do you mean anywhere?
Broad to Front Street,
Yeah.
in those which are
Mhm,
really obvious and really significantly contribute to
Right.
the feeling of the village. We know
Right.
we have air conditioning units. We know we have other things to try to hide and the trash bins and things. But
Mhm.
for people to just build saying that they have the right to do that is, I think, puts an unfair burden on us. I think it should be defined.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I also, one of my pet peeves is, you know, I mean, obviously we've got percentages of ground cover and that's I mean, I think
Yeah.
the HTC and everything abides by that, but what happens is when you're on a small lot. So you do your house, you do your footprint and that's all fine, but then you add a deck and then you add a pool and then you add another deck and none of that is covered. And you end up with a tiny little patch of grass in the front or on the side, and that's all the grass you've got left. And then they're putting in, a kind of camouflage around the pools or, screenings around the pools, which changes the views between the houses. And it's an aesthetic, and I don't know how it gets put in writing or
Right.
how it gets regulated. I have no idea, because it's,
Yeah.
people are very, it's their private property, so
Right.
if there's not a rule about it, it's
Right.
going to be hard to get around.
Right. It's funny. There are things that I do mention in here that aren't under jurisdiction, but I think it's important something like that, it's important still to put in here, because I mean, if you can change somebody's one person's mind, and I think that they are things sometimes that help, slowly deteriorate, a neighbor.
Well, there's one thing that you hit spot on, because I have had the privilege of reading Michael's thing.
My draft.
Yeah, your drafts, and I know you treat them as drafts, but I think they're brilliant. But we had 3 applications for second-story balconies in Codfish Park, and one of your recommendations at the bottom of Codfish Park was clearly no second-floor balconies.
Right. I mean, they're not, it's sort of like putting a roof walk on a building down there. I mean, there's no historic precedence. And that's the kind of thing that,
it slips by, and then my neighbor has one, so I want one. And the house behind me has one, so I want one. So I don't know how, legally, I don't know how we get around all that. But.
Right. I've taken 30 minutes over probably 30 minutes of your time. I can keep on going because we haven't even gotten into the neighborhoods, or I could come back at another time or leave it at there, or whatever you want. I mean, I can spend more time or quickly go through a neighborhood or two, threats and the.
What's anybody's feeling? I mean,
I've got time.
We're scheduled for like an hour. We could spend some more time with us. And of course, Michael, this will be, all written down. I mean, you've got it. We are going to see it again.
Yes.
So
the nice thing too, Michael, I don't know if you know that the histories that Betsy and Marcia are writing are also going to go into the Form Bs for the.
That's great.
Yeah. So
that is great.
I don't think your Building Wisconsin and mine can fit into anything like that, but I just wanted it to be available for as many people as want to tap into it. So
right. And it will be written. I'm hoping it will be published or put online or both.
All of those things. Yes. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Michael, before you continue, I just wanted to say 2 things. Clement brought up an important point about view and view shed. And that has a lot to do with the character both in town and Sconset of the vistas that you have. There might be a cluster of houses, but then there'll be these views between the houses back to fields or lower houses in the distance that give you a sense of space. And that changes when people build lot line to lot line, which zoning permits, but it's up to the HTC, which has the power to override zoning, always has, to say, no, that's not appropriate. Both in, the footprint and the volume, the height, all those things are character defining. And so anyway, however you want to implement that.
It's funny.
I
have mentioned views a little bit, and I do think the HDC has in my opinion, they have jurisdiction because it's a public benefit. If it's a historic, you know what I mean? If it's a historic view, or if it's
which it all is.
Yeah. So I mean, I think they do, but I don't know if they really implemented it.
And there's actually, believe it or not, even in the Wetlands Protection Act, there's a section about scenic views and overlooks, and that's with regard to the coastal bank. And I'm not trying to pick on Baxter Road, but typically, over the last 30 years, the tendency for hedges to go 12 feet high, and people a long time ago, you could go up the street and also on the south side of the South Bluff, and you could look over a hedge and see the ocean, and that to me is essential architecture, right? It's part of the whole thing, it's part of the whole legacy. And there's been little talk about that kind of a landscaping treatment or screening, with pools and everything. I think that's as important as the architecture as well. And especially if the screening is part of our purview, which it is,
Right.
that has to be thought about as well. And
You know, and I did mention that in Baxter Road. I think that is really critical in Baxter Road. I think it's critical anywhere, but
Yeah.
but even along the bluff walk, you know, where you used to have views of these historic houses, you have the view of the ocean, but you necessarily don't have
oh,
the
right.
historic building anymore. And you know, these people want privacy. I can understand, but actually the historic landscape along the bluff has changed
Yes.
because of the use, and you know, so it's a complicated thing. But and I do point things like that out in the report. I might not have a solution, but I at least pointed it out.
Hedge trimmers.
Yeah, hedge trimmers. But anyway, so do you want me to just go on a little bit, you know, and just talk?
Everybody okay with that? I mean,
Yeah, sure. Okay, good.
where would you like to start? Which neighborhood would you like to pick on?
Well, let me just see if I have I can talk about the historic core, because when we probably
All right.
have talked a little bit about that already. I think that, you know, what I'd like to do is talk about the threats, and then maybe the recommendations that I suggested, and see if am I missing anything or whatever, what you think. But, you know, the historic core, I think, is kind of unusual because it is built out. I don't think there's very little that can be done, but I think that those small changes that Caroline and Rob mentioned, you know, can have a major impact. So, you know, I have mentioned those things like the air handlers as a threat, as a typical threat, something that's small, and there's maybe something we're not even thinking about right now, but any kind of review, I think, has to be really careful. And you know, I don't know how you know, the whole idea of building in the right of way. You know, do you also require, you know, a real lot line that shows that plan, that shows the right of ways? I don't know. But anyway, that's something I was pondering. But in terms of historic core, I think the small things are a threat, but I put down lifting buildings in the historic core. I know that's controversial, but I think, not that you can't do it, but I think it should be discouraged whenever possible. You know, and there are other ways to, you know, put in a basement. You know, it can be dug, or you can do a foundation, crawl space to help. But I think those historic, especially the fish houses, are so important that I think that should be discouraged, at least in the historic core. You know, I think we've seen examples where a house or two have been lifted and they're higher than they should have been. Maybe that wouldn't happen today, but
It did happen today.
oh, did?
It has happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just something that, you know, for these national historic landmarks, like a 17th century fish house, we have to be really careful with that. And the same with raising the roof lines for dormers. There are a couple of really bad examples that have happened in recent years that unfortunately, maybe the SAB didn't want happened, but things got approved, you know, after you guys saw it. And I think the whole idea of lifting roof lines and second stories to those fish houses is something that, you know, just shouldn't happen. And I think it's hard to actually say, but I think you can recommend that, you know. I don't think you can say you can't do it, but you guys might be able to, if something is really important. But in design guidelines, I think it's just something that needs to be carefully reviewed. I could just briefly read the kind of recommendations I've done for the historic core, I think it's, and see what you think about these. It'd probably be easier for you guys to see this in writing, and I think at some point maybe it would be better, but so I won't go through all of it, but I'll just do some of it. I think it's critical that a building should not be presented in isolation. We've talked that already. A streetscape elevation plan should show the relationship of the new building or additions to its neighbors. A new building should not be taller than existing buildings on either side of the proposed project, or taller than any building along the broader streetscape. The front yard setbacks of neighboring structures should be maintained to preserve the existing street wall. I think that's really important in the historic core. So no new construction should be closer to the front line than buildings on either side of it. Or additions involving new dormers to existing structures should be carefully reviewed. Roof lines of historic structures, sections of buildings should not be altered to accommodate dormers. As a rule, new dormers should not be allowed on fish house main blocks. I think if something had a wing on it, that might be more appropriate, but I think they're probably, I was going to count them when I'm there, but they're probably a dozen fish houses that have their main block intact. And I would hope that they wouldn't be altered in the future. The idea of chimneys should be maintained and restored. I know that's always something that the advisory boards look at. And I think they're the main ones for the historic core. I also get in a little bit to landscape features, and I wanted to ask you, this. I think landscape features should always be very simple, but I think they should also be brick, shell, or cobble in the old historic district. And I didn't know if that's something that you all feel is important or not, or are there other materials?
Would you like more bluestone with that?
I mean, bluestone is fine up in Baxter Road, but is it really in the historic core? I don't know, so I didn't, that's the kind of thing that, if you had any thoughts,
Yeah,
on the landscape features that, could be more clearly defined, that would be great. Because I'm sure you get all kinds of materials that people propose. That,
I
No,
think we
mostly
get,
just bluestone.
once in a while we'll get a bluestone. But I know we do look at it pretty carefully, but
especially in the historic core, I think.
well, yeah, and
Yeah.
all those native field stones, right?
Right.
But having a list of them that like you're doing is very helpful to get it on paper.
That's what I thought, and I mean,
Yeah.
did I get them all as brick, cobble, and shell? Are they the ones? Or is there
Pretty
anything?
much, yeah. I mean, we get a bluestone now and again, or a flagstone for a stepping stone or something.
And
but-
that might be fine, in a small thing, but I meant for a patio or. No.
Well, just along those lines, Michael, our North Gully needs badly to be redone. And
Yeah.
thank goodness the DPW doesn't have time to do it. Otherwise, I feel like they would just, asphalt it over. And we were asked to think about that. And of course, you ask 6 people, you get 6 different answers, and then you get the public involved and you've got many, many, many more answers.
Huh.
But something like that, if we could, because I fear that, and I know they are going to do it at some point because the potholes are terrible. They're going to be resurfacing all the roads in Sconset at some point, and the
Mhm.
sidewalks and everything. And I just think if we could make some kind of a guideline for the
Mhm.
DPW of width of those gullies, or because that South Gully has both brick and cobble and You know, so there's
Yeah.
no real precedent. It's just, in my mind, it should just be a little, like a sidewalk going down there, you know,
Right.
something small.
Right, right. And I Middle Gully, I always loved that it had cobble too, you know, it just, you know, but I understand what you need some other surface for wheelchairs and, you know, that's the thing, you know, for ADA.
You know,
more than-
yeah.
So,
So any ideas on that? I mean, that as I say, it's come up, but it's be kind of on a back burner because
yeah.
nobody has the time to do it.
Now, if
And the Civic Association is right in there. You know, they want to
yeah,
talk about all this stuff too, and they should. That's
Right.
more of their deal than ours. So
right. Now, would it be helpful, like if once I come out there and I feel like this is, I'm pretty sure it's done. Would it be helpful for you all if I sent to you recommendation section or the red section? I'd hate to send, I mean, it's going to be long, so I hate to give somebody, oh, here's a 30-page review. But I mean, if something that, I mean, would that be helpful? And
Well, I think so, Michael. I mean, you know, we're gonna see it anyway. Let's.
I mean, I would
do the
love to
whole
have your
process.
comments before it's finalized. So, you know,
Right.
Michael, you forgot this, or you're off base on this, or whatever.
well, I think we didn't want to distribute your work until until it
felt
was actually
comfortable.
finished.
Yeah,
So
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to be able to share that with you guys.
Well, that's great. Well, this has been a terrific introduction, and we certainly know how much work it takes, and it's things that all of us as a group and individually over the years have been, you know, talking about. So it's just wonderful that that you are helping us focus on these things that come up in almost every meeting. So and also on the street and everywhere else. So
Mhm.
and
Well,
and I think with the pressure that we're under, not only as a board but also kind of a populace, Nantucket's getting you know, it's in yet another phase of pressure, more of the same, some more new things, and these things are important. So I think the timing is good.
Good. One thing I didn't want to, I didn't want this to be like, this is the only document. I mean, I think building with Nantucket in mind itself is wonderful, and it goes into a lot more detail. And of course, the HCC knows, you know, they have window surveys, and they know roof pitches that are appropriate, that sort of thing. This document won't go into that. This is really just the nuts and bolts of it, you know, rather than the real detail.
Right.
But I also, you know, I'm trying to be diplomatic. I want to put in as much as needs to be put in, but I also don't want to point fingers. So
Right.
when I'm there, what I'm going to try to do is provide good examples.
Great. Well, what's the next step in this?
Well, I am coming up next Monday and Tuesday. So I'll be out there in the field, walking around, just double checking things. I mean, if anybody wanted to, you know, join me for a walkthrough of, I'm going to be checking the boundaries. But if anybody's out there and you just want to stop by, or you want to, you know, go along with me, that's fine too. You know, Rob, if I'm doing Baxter Road, for example, but hopefully the weather's good so far. It looks like it will be good on Monday next week.
We'll take a few more of yesterday's, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was beautiful here too. So, I
great. Well, anybody else would like to say something to Michael or anything? And
I've got one thing as far as, you know, it's probably not going to be helpful for you to just reiterate, you know, everything with building with Nantucket in mind.
I know, yeah.
But you know, it is a book, and what you're talking about are recommendations that are specific to areas of Sconset, and that's one thing that you know, the building with Nantucket in mind would be a much fuller book. Like it's more in general, but we've always had to respect those guidelines, but also look for specific characteristics within neighborhoods and on particular streets. And Sconset is especially quirky that way, where something that would follow the guidelines doesn't fit as well as something that doesn't, just because of what it's surrounded by and its, the particular nature of that house. So I think that dividing Sconset up into these areas is a great addition in of itself for guidelines. And I don't think you're stepping on anybody's toes, and it's a nice reminder for those who may not be familiar with a particular area, what characteristics are character defining and all that. So thank you for your effort.
Yeah.
Thank you also to the trust and to Michael. I think it's going to be really valuable for all of us.
We hope so.
Yeah, I
know
hope
it.
so.
I know it will.
Yeah.
And that's why your feedback will be really important. And I'm hoping that I could have something complete by the end of the month, and that I can share it with you by then. So, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about it, or just to share it with you, and then talk about it after you've had a chance to review or whatever's best.
Okay.
Can you keep in touch with us for Monday and Tuesday and let us know where you are?
Sure. Sure, I can. I don't have any real schedule right now.
No, but whatever.
That I know I'm going to be out there if it's sunny, so.
Right.
But I can text you all or whatever.
Be nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Michael, thanks so much for coming. And like Carolyn said, it's very good of the Sconset Trust to be thinking in terms of these ways as well. And I think it's going to be beneficial for everybody. And maybe somebody will listen. So
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Can I hang on while you talk about zoning, whatever that zoning thing?
That actually was that's been there because there was going to be some potential zoning things, and it hasn't come through. But
okay.
The people in the office just left it on the agenda. Just so
for those running things. Okay.
Running, yes.
Okay.
Right.
So I think all we have to do now is adjourn, right?
Yeah,
Rob?
we don't have to approve nothing except our good looks and our excellent comments. So having said that,
Oh,
You got a thumbs up, Rob.
So with that, I'll take a motion for adjournment. It is 11:56.
Second.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Michael, see you soon.
Michael.
Hope to see you on Monday or Tuesday.
All right.
Yeah.
See you.
Good.
Bye.
Bye.